If you're so inclined to hear my story, this is my story. I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And throughout my life, there have been instances of early on of abuse. Sexual, physical, emotional abuse. And throughout my life, struggling with aspects of suicide. One of my earliest memories, even before the abuse, was my mother would go to a clean needle program that was being conducted in Philadelphia at the time, in which people would use intravenous drugs and then be able to take those used needles and exchange them for clean needles. And I remember being with my mother and a bunch of other people who had substance abuse issues, specifically intravenous drug issues. And I remember all I wanted to do was run into traffic. I even planned, this is talking like 7 years old, waiting for a truck, a semi to come down and just run in front of it. It was an active plan at 7 years old to end my life because I thought there was more to life, but for me, this was life. My father, who I keep a picture of behind, who I will never stop loving, was in federal prison. My father served 8 years in federal prison on drug charges. And so he wasn't there for me when I really needed him the most. That's something I've forgiven him for, but it's still something I wish he had been there, because then a lot of the challenges that I faced as a child wouldn't have been there. I am 43 now. I just came to terms with all of this stuff last year. So after 30 plus years of shit, I'm just now coming to terms with it. I'm just now sharing it. Because it was something that I had planned on keeping a secret till the day I died. Because I was afraid of how people would look at me. And so why am I sharing this story now as a 43-year-old man? Is it for likes? Is it for encouraging words like, you're so brave? Is it for people to talk shit? It's not only very cathartic to be able to share my story and not live a lie anymore, but also for people not to be able to use it against me. Because now it's here for the world to hear, here for the world to see and listen to. But it's also for other men who are struggling. Men who are struggling with their own inner demons and their own challenges, and how to be able to get through that, and how to be able to navigate those challenges and what they've kept a secret. My mother, as she engaged in her drug use, specifically intravenous drugs, would shoot up in to her genital area. This would have been for a lot of reasons. One was because I don't remember specifically, but that the veins in her extremities were no longer usable for the needle. And also it might have been for instances of a better high and why she would shoot up into her genital area. And as she progressed in her addiction, she would turn to prostitution. And as the money from that diminished, I was sold in various instances to men for sex. And as a 43-year-old man, I still remember aspects of the penetration. And I still even remember the taste of semen in my mouth, even 30 plus years later. And it wasn't until last year I really came to terms with it. And I really, really processed it. I really did that self-reflection and that self-inventory and accepted that I was a victim in this. But one of the things that really kept me in that cycle of not being able to come to terms with it was there was one instance in the abuse where there was one guy who was not as brutal as the rest. And where I experienced my first orgasm was with a man. And he just happened to be a little bit Again, there's nothing nice about these guys at all. But he was just a little less brutal than the rest. He was still on the same terms with them, but he just wasn't as brutal. And I recalled that event, and that's why I felt so little self-worth, because I enjoyed that one instance of the abuse. Whereas no, I'm not supposed to like this. I'm supposed to hate it. But that one instance, I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it. And I'm talking about 11 years old at this point. And so it's something I struggled with until I was 42 and really came to terms with it and really started to share my story with others in the hopes of not only them being able to get something out of it, but being able to come to terms with their own shit. That's not your fault. But at the same time, you are responsible for your own healing. You're responsible for getting yourself out of this. And you're responsible for not engaging in that behaviors of self-harm that you found yourself in, because that's where I found myself. As time progressed, I was able to lie to myself for a long time. I didn't get in any trouble in high school. I was actually, even though I experienced homelessness as a child, I experienced homelessness in high school. I was a good kid. Never got into any trouble. As a 40-plus-year-old man, that's where all the things where I wasn't able to process, the things I wasn't able to come to terms with, blew up like a fucking volcano. For 3 years, I was the other guy in a relationship, in a marriage. And I actually asked the woman who was married to marry me. To be fair, she said yes, but that shows how delusional I was in my thinking and how used to drama, and it's not normal. It's not normative behavior to ask a married woman to marry you, even whether or not you are sleeping with her. As time progressed, as me being the other guy, at one point she said, well, I'm going to work it out with my husband and I wish you the best. And I blew up like a fucking volcano. It became a legal matter. I won't go too far into it, maybe in further videos, but it became a legal matter. And I went on a 2-year journey to get my shit together. And that time after the affair fell apart and it became a legal matter, and having some judge in a very legalistic way tell me what a piece of shit I was and yelling at me. At that point, I was a law school graduate, and I had great respect for the legal system. And I had this perspective and this expectation that things were going to turn out well for me in this process, and it did not. And I fell further into suicide. And there were several instances throughout my life, not only as a kid, but I had placed guns in my mouth. I had placed a gun in my mouth at one point, a rifle, and the rifle was loaded. And I had only told one person that, and that was the person I was having the affair with. And she mentioned it without one iota of hesitation. She mentioned it in court. And here it is for the world to hear. And as time progressed in my own healing, in my own journey, doing my own inventory and my own regard for self-worth or lack of self-worth, I went on this journey of 2 years to get my shit together. Through mental health issues, I was in a mental hospital for 3 days. I fell into addiction. Able to lie to myself, like, oh, I've got a nice house. Actually, from my bedroom, I can see the Pacific Ocean. Nice house, good job. And through it all, just stacking on a cocaine habit, an Adderall habit, a Vicodin habit, a Percocet habit. Still able to lie to myself. Well, at least I'm doing this, I'm doing that. At least I'm not doing marijuana. I actually never tried marijuana. And that's how I was able to lie to myself. It's just coke. I'm a sophisticated guy. That's what sophisticated guys do, is they do coke. And on that 2-year journey, finally wanting to be the best me I could be, I decided to go to the foot of Mount Everest. So this is my story of somebody who grew up homeless, grew up being sexually abused, grew up being pimped out having sex before he was a teenager, suicidal, drug addicted. This is my story, how I made it through, not only going to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro in country of Tanzania, and then made it to Kilimanjaro, the tallest point in Africa, but also making it to the foot of Mount Everest. These are my stories of homelessness, addiction, mental hospital, to the foot of the tallest mountain in the world. Please join me as I share my story on my YouTube channel at Resolute Climb.